everybody. Welcome to the third session of COP Academy. Good afternoon from Brussels. So happy to see so many new faces with us today, as long as also so many old faces that you already joined us previously. Really super happy to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining for this third session. I know that some of you that are here today with us already sent us some emails asking for when is this third session happening. We are really sorry, but we took our time. We really needed to find the perfect topic and the perfect trainer. And in my personal opinion, I think we really did. You will let me know by the end of this session, but I think you all will agree with me. Super happy to have all of you with us today. But first, let's start a bit from the beginning. My name is Andrea. I'm one of the coordinators of COP Academy, together with my colleague Laura and definitely also Georgia. And COP Academy is a capacity building initiative under the Framework Partnership Agreement that International Cooperative Alliance has with the European Commission. If you are on social media, for sure you saw the hashtag Cops for Devil the Globe. Mainly this week that we also launched our youth report this Wednesday. So for sure we are all over Twitter and Facebook. Confident that my colleagues will let you the report. It's not related to this topic, but I just wanted to let you there. So indeed, when you see the hashtag Cops for Death, that is us. Before going ahead, and for sure you all want actually to hear from our trainer and not from me. However, I have to share with you a bit housekeeping elements. First and the most important thing, I would like to kindly ask all of you to please mute yourself for at least for this first part segment of the session. It's very important to create an environment where our trainer can actually share with you her knowledge and all her experience. Second, and the most important, and maybe I should have started with that, is that this session is recorded. If during the session you make an intervention and you don't feel comfortable with it being shared to all our social media accounts, please write us an email and we'll make sure to cut your part. At the same time, please use the chat function. Myself, as well as my colleague Laura and Georgia, will be in the chat monitoring as much as possible everything what is happening and then passing all the information to our trainer in the last segment of COP Academy. And talking about segments, as some of you already know, because you joined us previously, all COP Academy sessions are actually divided into 3 different segments. The first one is actually an in-depth understanding of the topic that Uma, our trainer today, she will take care of it. After that, we will split you in different groups, small groups, maybe around 7 to 10 people, where you will have the opportunity to exchange with your peers on a different questions that I don't want to spoil you the surprise. You will know when the time will arrive. For that segment, I will definitely ask all of you to share your opinion, but at the same time to also offer your colleagues the opinion to also share theirs. And in the last segment of COP Academy, you will come back to this group that we're having together. And here it will be a bit different than what you usually do. We usually screen the chat and we pass the questions to Uma, but in this case, I will kindly ask all of you to raise your hand. And when you raise your hand, I will pass the microphone to you. I'll pass the floor. You'll only have 2 minutes to say your opinion, your thoughts, whatever you want to share with us. And I think like this, we can be a bit more dynamic. And this being said, for sure, all of you, you are not here to listen more from me. I'm confident that all of us, what you want to know is at the end is the role of the digital labor platforms in transforming the world of work. And what is the added value of the COP movement on that? No? For that, we have with us today Ms. Uma Rani. She's actually the senior economist at the ILO Research Department. And with this being said, Uma, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrea, for inviting me over to the Co-op Academy to actually speak about the report. And I'd like to quickly share my presentation. Can you see my presentation? Yes. Great. Okay. That's it. Fantastic. I think one of the downsides of a presentation virtually is that you only end up seeing the slide and not anybody else. So for me, who loves to have a human interaction, I always find this very difficult. But nevertheless, I'm actually quite honored and very pleased to talk to all of you from the Co-op Academy. And it's a very good opportunity for us to present our report, which was just released last week. And the report actually has elements on the cooperatives. So I want to actually start with talking about why we did this report and what the problems are and challenges, and how cooperative model could be a very nice alternative to actually address some of the insecurities that are faced by the workers. So this is a 2-year project that we did. It's a work that's been going on for a couple of years, but it's been quite intense over the last 2 years to put together this entire report on role of digital labor platforms in transforming the world of work. And the reason why we focus on this issue is largely because they're increasingly shaping the future of work and also are becoming part of our everyday lives. So this report actually discusses the transformation of digital labor platforms that are bringing about to the world of work. The report shows that over the past few, it, the, the report shows that over the past few decades, there has been a five-fold increase in the number of digital labor platforms globally. Whether you're talking about taxi platforms, delivery, online web-based, or hybrid platforms that actually do different types of service, both e-commerce, delivery, and taxi. And they are actually concentrated only in few countries. It's United States where 29% of the platforms are concentrated, followed by India and United Kingdom. But don't forget the fact that all of these platforms operate globally. They might be positioned or located in a particular country, but they are operational throughout the world. Now, the rise of the digital labor platforms have largely been enabled due to the availability of technological innovations like cloud computing and infrastructure and the use of big data and algorithms. The result has been innovative ways of working and flexibility for both workers and business. At the same time, as you'll see on the right-hand side of the slide, the rise of such platforms have also created a growing digital divide between different parts of the world, and it is accentuated by the fact that 96% of the investments are largely concentrated in three regions: Asia, North America, and Europe. Further, if you look at revenues per se, you find that 70% of the revenues generated are actually concentrated in two countries, United States and China. And you have 11% of the revenues in Europe and 18% of the revenues in other regions. Now, despite such a digital divide, digital labor platforms have actually been gaining a lot of prominence among both workers and businesses. They bring in significant benefits to businesses to access workers and source the talent globally. It allows them to reduce cost and improve efficiency. They also help a lot of small and medium-sized businesses to expand their customer base using location-based platform. What we also talk about in the report is how the rise of such platforms has also led to the growth of artificial intelligence startups, and they also have helped many of the earlier call centers and business process outsourcing firms to reorient themselves in the context of a digital economy. However, despite many of these opportunities, there are also many challenges for businesses which relate to unfair competition, high commission fees, lack of transparency in algorithms, and I think most importantly, the reason why you see 96% of the investments in only one part of the world and not others is because there is a digital divide even with regard to the infrastructure that is actually available. Now, the report also goes about showing that these labor platforms are creating new work opportunities and providing flexible work arrangements for certain workers, such as women, persons with disabilities, and young people. They're also fostering new business opportunities, especially in developing countries. At the same time, these platforms also pose a number of challenges because they are changing the way the work is organized and the way the work processes are organized. Now, let me tell you what they are. Now, the report actually dedicates an entire chapter to understanding the platform business model. What is this model that we are talking about? And it actually underlines three distinct features of this model. The first is that it is through algorithmic management practices that the entire business model runs, whether it is allocation of work, whether it's evaluation, whether it's monitoring, or whether it's rewarding workers once the work is done. Second is, as I mentioned before, there is a change in the organization of work. So, what do we mean by that? So, earlier workers could go to a company and actually undertake the task, and all the capital assets and the operating costs would be borne by the company. In this model of platform business, all of this cost is actually shifted on to the worker. So, you have a taxi driver who has to own his own taxi, puts all the money to operate the cost, whether it be fuel, whether it is mobile charges for the internet, whether it is maintenance or whatsoever. Similarly, a freelance worker has to invest in a computer, in the internet infrastructure, to pay the bills of electricity, to create a space within one's own home, and to pay the rent of it. So all of these costs and risks that are associated with it are not with the business, but it is with the worker. The third fundamental change, and the most important one, is related to the creation of a dual structure of the labor market, or what we call as the segmented labor market, where you have a core workforce which actually works with the platform, and you have a large workforce for whom the platform mediates the work. Like if you look at the right-hand side of this particular side, you find that on the left are the core workers who are employed by the platform, and on the right-hand side, it's the workers whose work is actually mediated. And now, as a result of this, what you find is that there's been a huge growth of the number of platforms, as was mentioned before. So this report actually tries to understand, using surveys and interviews of about 12,000 workers and 85 representatives of business, with regard to what the opportunities and the challenges are for these workers across the world, across multiple sectors. One of the things that we do find is that despite the diversity in the types of digital labor platforms, their business model has very common elements. You have certain indicators for matching the clients with workers, and these are always the same, whether it is client reviews, rating, worker profiles, project history or portfolio, or what is the rate proposed by the worker. They all have a revenue model in which it's commission fees or subscription plans, which are integral part of it. The third is they use algorithmic mechanisms to actually monitor, track, and evaluate workers. And they use different digital tools also to monitor the work processes. And the last and the fourth, which is the most fundamental again for this model, is the rules of governance. Now, it's very interesting, and if you have noticed this, that platform businesses are not regulated. They are self-regulated, and they're unilaterally determined by the platforms. So they have their own exclusivity clauses. They can deactivate accounts when they want. They do not have any dispute resolution mechanism, and they lay down a number of other aspects. Now, whether you're a worker, whether you're a client, or whether you're a customer, unless and until you say you agree to the terms of service agreement of any platform, you do not really get access to it. So you do not really have much choice often, and you have to go about accepting what is there. Now, as a result, there are huge implications on the workers with regard to the regularity of income, with regard to the earnings, with regard to a number of other aspects. And here today, I'm going to touch a couple of them so as to give you an indication of what these challenges are. Now, what we found is that earnings vary across countries and types of platforms. Now, most workers earn less than average. If you look at the right-hand side bottom part of the hourly earnings, you find that on microtask platforms, workers earn about $3.3 per hour. And on freelance platforms, they earn about $7.6 per hour. And we found that about 50% of the workers on online web-based platforms earn less than $2.1 per hour. If you look at the delivery sector, you find that the earnings range between $0.9 to $3.5 per hour, and it depends largely on the countries. Whereas in the taxi sector, it ranges between $1.1 to $8.2 per hour. One thing that we did notice was in location-based platforms, workers earn more than the traditional counterparts in both the taxi and the delivery sectors. But we have to be mindful of the fact that workers on these platforms work very long hours. In some countries, on taxi sector, they work for about 65 to 85 hours per week. That is double the amount of working hours that is specified by laws, that is the international labor law. The other aspect which is very important is that, as mentioned before, the business model runs on commission fees, and which has a huge impact on the earnings of the income. Now, it's not just the commission fees that the workers pay. Workers pay different types of fees. These involve fees to actually improve their visibility, fees to improve their profile. It's sometimes even fees to enter and to actually enter and access work on these platforms. And all of these and then they also pay fees for withdrawing the money or for currency exchange. Sometimes all of these fees together comes to around 50% of the earnings of the workers. And here what I've tried to show is the commission fees that ranges between 3.5 to 20% on one platform, but it can also range between 3.5 to 35% on some platforms. And in taxi platforms, you find workers paying between 5% to 25%. Now, there are also differences that can be observed between countries and gender. Workers in developing countries tend to earn less than those in developed countries, especially on freelance platforms, and it is 60% less than what's earned by workers in developed countries. And there's also a significant gender pay gap on some platforms at the country level, while the findings are quite mixed globally, where we find that there is a wage gap, actually, if you look at raw figures, but when they are controlled for a number of other factors, you do not necessarily find these wage gaps existing. The other issue that is very pertinent is related to poor social protection coverage. We found that majority of the workers on these platforms lack social protection, and there are large gaps with regard to health insurance, work-related injury provision, unemployment and disability insurance, and old age pension and retirement benefits. And if you look at one indicator, which is a pension, you find that on online web-based platforms, only 20% of the workers have any pension coverage, which declines to 17% among delivery platforms. It leaves platform workers at risk from COVID-19. On location-based platforms, 7 out of 10 workers indicated not being able to take paid sick leave or to receive compensation in the event that they were to test positive for the virus. And this has huge implications on the society and the clients per se, because you're transposing that virus across a whole range of people, which has been a big issue as we have seen the past year. Now, the other issue that is very important is how algorithms are altering how workers are hired, evaluated, or remunerated. And this has huge implications on both the access to work as well as earnings of the workers. We find that it is largely defining the everyday experiences of the workers. Algorithms determine both the allocation of work, performance, and ratings, and irrespective of the platforms, we find a large proportion of respondents saying that the workers' ratings are decisive for accessing work. And workers also say that if their work is often rejected, and this also has a negative impact on their accessing work and also their continuity with regard to uh, on the platform. And many workers also say that they are unable to refuse or cancel work without having any negative impacts. Rejection of work and low ratings are very common. And often you also found that workers were saying that because of low rating, their account is also deactivated. Many are also unaware of the formal process for filing a complaint or seeking help when they have problems on these platforms. And often, this type of work, whether it be on the location based platforms or on the online web based platforms, the workers, as I said earlier, are classified as self employed or independent contractors and not as employees, largely because they feel that there's a lot of control and autonomy with the worker. But what we found systematically across our survey respondents was that workers on freelance platforms were monitored by the clients for the hours worked. They were required to take screenshots of their work on a regular basis. And about 43% also said that they were required to be available during a specific time. Now, this actually fails the general notion of flexibility, control, or autonomy that the workers have. And you very clearly see that there's a very clear relationship that there exists between an employer and an employee, which has been the most debated issue. Now, given that, what the report also does is it looks at some of the alternative models that are there. And what I've tried to do here is try to put together what are the other forms of alternative models that have been coming up. And platform cooperatives is very clearly one of the areas which is quite interesting to look at. So if you look at food delivery, there are quite a few platforms that have come up. And here I'd like to just highlight Co-op Cycle and Smart. And Smart is something that we all know quite, it's quite popular and quite prominent among scholars who have been looking at the cooperative models, and especially platform cooperative. And it was very interesting that Smart went into an agreement with Deliveroo and Take It Easy in 2015 to ensure minimum wages, minimum working hours, safety training, bonuses, in reimbursement of mobile phone usage, full payment of non-technical glitches to the workers if they become part of a member of Smart. Now, this model was very successful for workers, largely when Take It Easy went bankrupt in 2016. As a result of it, Smart was able to compensate a number of couriers from its fund who were actually part of it. And this had a huge impact on improving or stabilizing the conditions of the workers who were part of it. But however, what happened was in 2017, there was a change in the taxation law of Belgium, and there was also a change in the policy of Deliveroo with regard to how it was identifying its workers. As a result, it led to a discontinuation in agreement with Smart in 2017. So as a result of it, Smart has not been reinvigorated. Rather, it is trying to now look at how it can actually come up with a new model to actually address some of these challenges. One thing I'd like to say is that while Smart was providing this cooperative model to the workers, there was also a lot of criticism with regard to Smart. One of the criticism was that Smart was accepting the platform business model the way it was, not questioning it, and also accepting the fact that the workers were being, classified as self-employed, which is being contested both by the legal lawyers as well as by the academics and by worker associations across the world. So as of now, there's still a discussion as to how it will reinvigorate and get back into a model that could be more sustainable for the workers. Within the domestic worker sector, there have been a number of models that have come in. And here I'd like to just highlight Brightly Cleaning and Up and Go. Up and Go has been very, very popular, especially in New York, because it not only tries to give voice to the disadvantaged groups of workers who are part of it, but it is also a cooperative for professional home cleaners. Now, this model sets up their own terms of conditions, and it's very interesting that only 5% of their earnings actually goes towards the maintenance of the platform, which is also very important. And what we found is that it's based on secondary literature that the cleaners who are part of Up and Go earn about $4 to $5 more than the other cleaners around in the same area who are working on platforms. So this is something quite innovative and something that we need to see whether it can be upscaled, whether it can be sustained, and whether how do you actually sort of promote these kinds of models going into the future. Within the mutual care cooperative, there have been a number of examples that have been coming up. There's a Kobe Consumer Cooperative in Japan. There's an Equal Care Co-op in United Kingdom. Then there's Nurses Scan that has come up, which has also been working to provide care services to a lot of other people. Now, other areas where cooperative models have come in, I'm just going to touch upon it because of lack of time, are the taxi cooperatives. And here that's quite interesting to see how there's not one model, but there are two different models that are coming in. One is the Green Taxi Cooperative or the ATX or the EVA Coop, where workers, the taxi drivers, ride sharers, and consumers can become part of the cooperative, and drivers seem to earn a higher rate compared to other drivers on similar platforms in the region. And I think what is very good about this platform is also the fact that it provides a number of benefits and gives them paid time off, which is one of the issues that we see in the platform business model. Similarly, there's a driver seat model from the data cooperatives of the US, where actually this cooperative collects data and sells this data to city agencies so as to improve the planning decisions of the transportation companies or the transport agency itself. And the reason why this is very important is one of the drivers of the platform business model is the data. It's because of the availability of data that there's been a rise in the platforms, and the data is used to actually improve algorithms. So there's been a big debate in the literature and even among different associations today with regard to the user right over this data, and worker organizations have been fighting towards these user rights over data and how the monetization of this data actually takes place. So this is actually a very interesting example towards it. The other areas where cooperatives are coming up in a big time are the e-commerce platforms, that is the online marketplace. And there are very different experiments that are coming up in this actually platform basis. The other area is the agriculture, where you have platforms coming up both for business to business, so that farmers can actually access inputs. But there's also quite a bit of business to consumers, where farmers can actually sort of sell their goods directly to the consumers without any intermediaries. And also there are platforms such as the Open Food Network, which actually offers you a number of tools and other logistics to actually develop your own platform within the larger scale of the platform that exists. Now, as a result of the mainstream dominant platform business model, there have been a lot of problems with regard to the working conditions of the workers. And here, what has been happening is that there have been different regulatory responses that have been taken by different countries to address many of the working conditions issues. These range from addressing occupational safety and health at one end and work injury, to addressing the employment relationship, whether a worker is an employee or the self-employed. So now the ILO, what it does is that given the variation that is there on the regulatory responses of these workers, one suggestion it does give is that can we sort of think of an alternative model or try to see how we can improve the existing model of the platform by ensuring that worker rights and working conditions are actually protected. So in this context, it also tries to look at what are the different soft law initiatives that have been taken by governments, by platform organizations, and sometimes even by trade unions in actually helping to address many of these conditions. And in this context, the report also tries to say that given the diversity that is there in the regulatory response, it's not enough at the country level to actually say that we have reached a decision, because much of it is a court decision that is binding on a particular company, and it is not really uniform at overall country level or even at the international level, because the platforms operate in multiple jurisdictions. So it says that the only way to effectively protect workers and businesses would be to have a much more coherent, consistent, and coordinated international effort. And to achieve this, it urges for an international policy dialogue and coordination that would be quite vital to find a common regulatory solution and to reinforce the fact that universal labor standards are applicable to all workers. And it calls for saying that irrespective of whether a platform worker is classified as an employee or a self-employed, and it doesn't matter in which part of the world they are located, they should enjoy the right to associate, to bargain collectively, and to be protected against discriminatory conduct and unsafe workplaces. As was rightly also said by our DG Guy Ryder, we believe that what is not acceptable in the analog world of work should not be acceptable in the digital world. And it lays down 15 recommendations towards it. Many of them are part of the labor law, but many others are not part of the labor law and touches upon other fields of policy, such as transparency and accountability in algorithms, data protection, portability of worker data and ratings, and competition laws, so as to ensure that there is some harmonization between competition and labor laws so that workers can collectively bargain and have the freedom to associate. And finally, I would end by raising two questions for you for your discussion. Is what are the challenges of the current platform cooperative model and how can we address them? And second is, how can we develop a sustainable platform co-op which is beneficial to all? I hope you enjoyed listening to me and look forward to your questions and discussion. Thank you very much.
Super, then welcome back. Please write in the chat your thoughts after the discussions and questions and whatever you have in your head. And in between, maybe please raise your hand. If you have a question or you have any kind of thoughts for Uma, raise your hand and I'll pass you the floor. So before going there, maybe I can pass the floor a bit to Laura. I think we've identified very good questions from the first segment where Uma was giving her presentation. Now, Laura, what do you think?
Yes. So we received, for instance, a question from Frank Cetera, based in New York. So Uma, it was when you were referring to the rapid growth of platform and the digital divide. And Frank was asking, so does the investment and number of platforms in those countries correspond closely with internet access equity?
Absolutely, very clearly. So these are countries where internet access and digital infrastructure is very good. So it's actually countries like United States, China, India, UK, where you have a high rate of investment on these companies. But sometimes it's also one company or two companies that get a lot of investments. So, it's much more like winner takes all model that is coming up, where irrespective of whether a company has profits or not, there's more and more investment that gets into these particular, companies.
Okay, does someone else would like to make a question? Please raise your hand so I can see you. No, please don't be shy. Okay, I'm seeing Sudan. Yes, please, go ahead. We cannot hear you. You'll have to unmute yourself, unfortunately.
What are the governance mechanism for, regulating this platform cooperatives? Any regulatory structure?
For the platform cooperatives, I think many of the platform cooperatives that have been there, they have their own regulatory structure that they set it up. But for the mainstream platform business model that we have, there's absolutely no regulations. So that's one of the things that we are asking for, that these platforms be regulated and be taxed, because both these things are not happening. That's why I said that they're self-regulated because they have their own terms of service agreements and they're unilaterally determined by themselves. So, there's no proper structure that is there or anything. And it's like anything that you buy, whether you want to become part of a Spotify or whatsoever, you only have to click the user agreement button, and the user agreement button becomes the law of the platform. And I think that's what is problematic.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, then I'm seeing Helene. Helene, she raised her hand. Please, Helene, go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. One of the things that we mentioned in our little group as one of the challenges was that was actually like the code that is used, of course, to set up these platform cooperatives, something that I didn't know. So if any of my colleagues of the group want to jump in, happy for them to explain it better than I possibly can. But I thought this was very interesting, is that it is very expensive and is one of the challenges also for them for setting up one of these platform cooperatives, and that maybe some kind of using the solidarity between cooperatives and sharing this code could maybe help scale up the model and make sure that there's more of them. So I was wondering what you were thinking of this.
I'm very glad that you asked this question, because this was raised in our group by two of the members with regard to, how do you set it up in the sustainability? And one of the things that I've been telling them is that what's quite interesting about the digital economy is the fact that a lot of digital tools are today available open source. So, it's not just a platform itself, where the infrastructure which you can lease or hire for certain payment, but also setting up of the entire structure. There are digital tools that are available. There are software programs that are available in the open source for free. And all you need is a programmer who's willing, and there are lots of programmers who are also willing to do it free of cost. So, it doesn't come with a huge cost today. And many of the big platforms that you hear today, whether it's the Ubers or the Deliveroos or the Rappies or the Globos, they all use open source platform material, whether it is software, whether it is digital tools or whatsoever, to develop it. So this is easily doable. And I think what the code that you were talking about is the algorithm. Now, this algorithm is something that humans actually coded. And what I was trying to tell the colleagues in my group was also the fact that you can find a computer programmer who's willing to sit down and help you do this coding. It doesn't take so much of time. And many of these codes, the basics are available today. But I think what gets tricky with many of the top companies today is the fact that much of these algorithms are not openly available. The source code of the algorithm are a secret, and they are part of the trade secret laws, which is part of the WTO. And that's where it gets challenging. And that's how the companies have tried to go around all the other laws, by positioning it there. And that's one of the challenges that we are dealing with. Whereas if you have a cooperative, this need not go to the trade secret law. And you could have a open source code of the algorithm saying that this is a source code that we utilize, and this is how we match, and this is how we reward, this is how we evaluate. And it would be such a good example to set in for others to follow. And I think the more you have such transparencies, the more there would be an attractiveness towards these models. And I think that's where I find that can we think of cooperatives as an alternative model, or which is viable, which is sustainable? It does not require too much of cost, and there's a lot of goodwill that is there available that you can utilize. Like you have the Apache Software Foundation, where you can go and train, you can go and learn, you can go and gain so much of other skills and solve a number of problems. So such foundations are innumerable today that are available, and people in the tech community are also willing to help for free, and not everything is for a cost. And I think we can capitalize on it.
Super. Thank you so much, Uma.
Just to add on that point, there is like I just learned. Well, no, I learned in the course of Platform Cops that I'm managing that there is like a specific license that cooperatives can add to their code. That it makes it free for cooperatives, but not free for capitalistic companies. So I think it's interesting to go deeper in the source of like I think, yeah, I mean, Uma, but I think she knows more than me for sure. I'm just part of the course, but I think that it is important to understand what are the possibilities that as co-op developers we have to in the one side, make sure that the co-ops can benefit, but without, but maybe creating some kind of barriers for the other sectors. You know, I think it's, and I think this is being made, and this exists. So I think it's very cool.
Super, thank you so much, Anna. I saw Elsa raising her hand. I mean, I have her front of me, but then I see that the hand disappeared, so I don't know.
No, I haven't disappeared. The hand disappeared.
Okay.
Not me.
Go ahead, Elsa.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Uma Rani. But I would like to ask you about, because I was in a very interesting group with people from the Philippines and Colombia, Nigeria, etc., and all of them, they spoke about the lack of, well, of legal framework. This was the principal, one of the principal problems, besides the problem that there was also a lack of knowledge about the cooperative model. But about the legal framework, do you have some suggestions, Uma?
With regard to the legal framework, I think one thing that we are noticing with the platform business model is the complete lack of regulations there. So I think what we are fighting for is to establish a kind of a legal framework within the platforms, so that there's a regulatory structure, and there is also a structure. You know, one of the issues that you face with platforms is the fact that it is not tangible, but it is intangible. You can have a platform set up anywhere because it's in the cloud. And depending upon the tax haven that you have, you can place your platform in that particular cloud. And that becomes one of the major challenges for us. But given this challenge, I still think that you could sort of have a regulatory structure that very clearly defines, it doesn't matter where from you're operating. The fact that you're operating in all of these countries, you have to be governed by an international regulatory structure or a governance system. And I think we are at the ILO trying to work towards such a governance structure. Now, with regard to the cooperatives, I think the cooperative regulatory structure has its own mechanisms. I think one way of going about is to see how some of the cooperative regulatory frameworks can be actually adapted for the digital labor platform. And that could be also something that the platform business can actually learn, and we can learn how this can be utilized in the mainstream platform business model to regulate that. So it could be a very good, example setting to see how the existing governance structure of the platform could be utilized into a digital platform cooperative, which actually works cross-border, not really defined in certain national boundaries.
So you said that the ILO is working on this international legal framework now?
I think the report was a push towards that. And at least now we are going to open up this conversation and get into a discussion with regard to what needs to be done.
Thank you so much.
Can I raise a follow-up question to this? It's a very interesting discussion. As you know, sometimes, to have the enforceable international convention or agreement or recommendations, including the ILO, it's rather hard because, once, spend so many years getting the treaty or agreement agreed, but then, the domestic situation making it not either recognized or enforced or whatever. So I was wondering whether we could think also, in your opinion, whether a substitute, a soft form of a governance regulation of a standards, would that work, as an interim solution, eventually work? Because, instead of waiting for some form of international agreement to come about, life is going on in the present. So if we could look at, of course, I'm not saying standard setting is any easier. It's also requiring some time. But nowadays with the ISO organization, it's moving faster. So I was wondering whether a standard or standardization of the proper management and governance of a platform cooperative can be an in-between step. What's your...
I think this would be a fantastic idea, actually, to go about it. As you very rightly mentioned, a standard setting process of the ILO, if we are even to start now, it will take another 4 or 5 years to get there. And the pace at which this model is actually moving is at a very rampant stage. One thing that I've learned from my past experience is that workers do get attracted to earning incomes in a much more sustainable and a regular manner. And if they do find out that cooperatives is a way out and it gives them security, it gives them regularity, it's very easy for them to jump from one of the mainstream business models to a cooperative model. So I think for me, this is the right time for cooperatives to actually enter into this arena, because everything is getting digital across almost every sector of the economy that you can talk about. And one of the reasons it becomes digital is because data has become a very important commodity in the process, because the data can help you to tell you what the consumer preferences are, to basically try to get you closer to the consumers also, and to improve your sales or whatsoever. So given that context, I think if the cooperative structure or the cooperative model can come up with an alternative with very few standards set saying, this needs to be followed, I think that could be a very good example. What we have been trying to do also working with the academia is the Fair Work Foundation, which has actually gone about trying to rate some of these platform businesses. And they have laid out fair work principles there, which actually help you in rating many of these platforms. So, you can use some of these very basic principles and then try to argue saying that the cooperative model actually works on these basic principles, and there are very clear guidelines that are there on how it should operate and what it's needed. And I think there are already quite a few cooperatives that are there. I think that you can learn from their experiences and try to build on and actually expand and scale it out. And sometimes, like I was saying, and I want to give a chance to John, who's raised his hand for a while, is that, you could also have area-specific models coming in, which are smaller, and then trying to expand across a particular region.
Super. Maybe Anton. I think you are meaning Anton. No, you want to go ahead?
I think there is John. Oh yeah, Anton. Yeah, sorry. I thought it was John.
If we see John, because I saw a few Johns in the audience as well, please feel free to raise your hand and then second. We'll take the turn. If not, Anton, please go ahead.
Okay. Thanks a lot for your presentation today. I work for the European Confederation of Worker and Social Cooperatives. I followed you yesterday at the European Parliament's committee meeting, where you also did your presentation. Very well done. I think it's a very timely report provided by the ILO, for us in Europe at least, with the platform work initiative going on. Quickly to tap on the debate about the regulatory framework. By now, if I understood you correctly, we talked mostly about the regulatory framework for the cooperative. I think there's a second dimension to it, and that is the legal status of the workers of the cooperatives, which at the moment is heatedly debated, because many people argue that cooperatives employ people as self-employed people, which is contradictory to employ someone as self-employed, in order to avoid the costs which would come with a regular employment status. And based on your research, I would wonder what your take is. Do you think that the model of self-employed is prone to exploitation? And would you think that the legal frameworks that are in place for employees, so for people who have a normal work contract, are actually sufficiently broad to cover all these various types of cooperatives that you platforms, and not cooperative platforms, but normal platforms that you covered in your study?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. And if you have looked at the report, actually the report for a change, though it comes from the ILO, takes a very broad, comprehensive lens into this entire issue and does not focus only on the employer-employee relationship. I think the employer-employee relationship is fundamental and is very important. But given this was a global report, and given that you have a range of developing countries where you have high informality and high proportion of workers in the self-employed workers, I think the issue becomes fundamentally, how do we protect workers? And the second issue I want to raise there before I get down to answer the question is, you have to think a bit about the platform business model itself. The minute you get regulations, the minute you start imposing things, the platform businesses are not sitting there quiet. They're changing the model by the day. And their idea is how not to give all of these benefits and how not to actually comply with it. So, you might come up with saying, okay, employee, would that solve the problem that you're asking? No. One of the reasons why it won't solve the problem is it'll solve the problem to an extent as far as working conditions and benefits are concerned. But remember that we are also talking about algorithmic management. So we are talking about the source code of the algorithm, which is not part of your labor law. It is part of the trade secret of the WTO. Number two, you're talking about data protection, data mobility, rights, user rights over data monetization. All of this is not yet part of the labor law, but it is coming in there, but at a very slow pace. How do you actually handle that? Because these two are fundamental to it. How do you handle the whole issue of taxation? I think that's another fundamental issue that comes in. So my take would be, I think, yeah, there is a criticism on the cooperatives that they classify them as self-employed workers and exploit them. My way of addressing all of these problems would be to say that irrespective of the status of the worker, whether you want to classify them as an employee or a self-employed, and this is the point that I made it yesterday at the European Parliament, and I would like to reiterate here, workers should have universal labor standards, which are applicable to all, irrespective of what your status is. And I think once we get onto that road, then the whole issue of whether you're exploited or not doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what these companies are actually classifying these workers. And I think that gets over the other question that you asked, saying that can all the workers be classified as employees? That's where the trick comes. They will immediately come up and say that, okay, you are not working so many hours, so you're not an employee. So you have to work so many hours to become an employee. And they'll try to see that you do not get so many hours, right? You have the algorithmic management, right? You will ensure if we are fighting by saying, one of the fights that I have in the report is also the fact that if your commission rate comes down with a particular client over a period of time after you've earned so much of money, that means that it's an employer-employee relationship. Now, what is the platform going to do? It'll ensure that you don't have the same client for more than once. So they'll try to ensure that you do not reach that threshold. There's so many mechanisms that can be utilized. So how do we beat those mechanisms? And that's where I feel the more I look into the platform business model, I feel that we need to beat the model first. And one way of going around it for me is, why don't we go with the fact that irrespective of the labor status, let's ensure everybody has a universal labor right. And cooperatives could be a very good example towards it, to ensure that workers have better incomes, have benefits, have paid leave, have other, and get into other areas like data, where data cooperatives are already coming in. I think the only thing that you don't get into is the source code of the algorithm, but you can come up with saying that the source code of algorithm for this particular platform cooperative is open source. Anybody can have access to it. It's not part of the trade secret law. There you easily beat the mainstream business model. So there are mechanisms that can be utilized, I feel. And I think much of my thinking is also coming with interaction with all of you. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Uma. I see that Moshed has a question. Please go ahead. You raised your hand.
Andrea, I might have to leave in 5
Yes, I have one question. So, yeah, so that is for the S8000 or the social accountability auditing system.
Yes.
I think the question was cut there. While Moshe is coming back, I see Isaac. And if you can take maybe the last question, because indeed Uma needs to leave. She has another meeting. Thank you so much for accepting to join us, Uma. Maybe Isaac, please go ahead. If you can be brief, it would be really appreciated. Isaac? No? I cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
So thank you. And I've been following all of the discussions. I am Isaac M. Supu. I'm from Liberia, West Africa, and I'm studying in Rwanda, East Africa. So, like, I have been, when I've been in my country, I've never heard or known about cooperative, international cooperative or cooperative management until I left the country to come to another country. There where I heard about cooperative. And when I started making research, I felt that this is my area. All of the activities that I've been doing, they have been directly involved or they have been in the scope of this particular career. So my question is, how do we take this message to other countries? Honestly, for my country, I don't think there's no single course that is offered there that teach about cooperative. And we have young people that I serve, entrepreneurs, but they don't realize that self-actualization is not there because there's nobody to talking to them about it. So how do we take the message across to other countries that we can be able to reach more people to have to be involved into this, people who are already in this sector? How do they know? How do they realize their potential? Like for me, I couldn't realize my potential that I was in this area until I left. So how do we get to other people?
I think one way of going about it is to raise awareness about the cooperatives, and also to bring some very good examples from other countries about how they have been successful, but at the same time being mindful that there are challenges where there have been failures, to touch upon them and to say that, okay, this is a learning that we've had and how not to do certain things. I think awareness is what would be fundamental and very important. And I think this needs to be brought into the mainstream discourse within the country. And I think that's the only way to actually push for it.
Yes. The school could be a very good area to use to get the message about cooperative to other people.
Absolutely.
But in other countries, there's nothing offer like cooperative management or something like cooperative. So I mean, it's a problem.
Yeah, I agree with you, actually.
Okay, so then Uma,
There is one more
would
person.
you like? Okay, perfect. Then we pass the message to Shmuel.
And then that's it.
Okay, thank you so much. Shmuel, if you would like to address your question, please.
Yeah. I
Yes,
can.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to ask you if a model of a cooperative, a model of a cooperative ownership on different companies and employment places fit to all types of workplaces, or we can to gain that this model can to be good just for little companies in fields of agriculture, food, and like fields, and example for large industrial companies, this model not fit, and if you speak about largest companies, we need to think about other models of direct ownership of a state.
That's a bit difficult for me to answer this question. And I'm just going to pass this on. Sorry, Andrea. I don't think
it's okay.
I don't think I got it. I don't want to make a statement.
I believe that Shmuel, if I'm not mistaken, already wrote it in the chat. So maybe what we can do, we'll definitely save the chat. We'll share it with Uma, share it to all of you. And maybe among each other, we can find already an interaction so we can change the different and we can answer to our questions. On this being said, I will definitely like, on behalf of COPS for Dev and the COPS Academy team, to thank you so much, Uma, and also the ILO COP unit for accepting our invitation, for being here, for sharing with us what this new report is saying. And thank you to all of you for joining once again COP Academy and for all the amazing interventions. I will save the chat. We will definitely share the recording. And I wish all of you an amazing weekend ahead. I will definitely look forward to see you on the fourth session, of COP Academy. And thank you once again. Thank you so much for such a vibrant atmosphere. I don't know what you think, but for me at least,
it was a real pleasure. It was a real pleasure to be part of the Co-op Academy, and I really enjoyed the interactions and also talking to you all. So thanks so much.
Thank you, and have an amazing weekend. Please enjoy.
Thanks a lot.
Ciao,
Bye.
ciao.
Bye.